Hello everyone, and welcome back. In our previous section, created the basic UI for our shopping application, where we created a card and we used list without builder, bouncing scroll physics, column, padding, image or network, container, etc. 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 Then we checked what exactly packages are, and then we also checked what where all the packages are listed, that is pub.dev. We also saw where we can add our packages, that is inside pubspec.yaml file. We also have dev dependencies. Then we also created a model class for our JSON response. We saw what API exactly is, how do API works, what all methods we have in API, get, post, put, delete, etc. Now, the next steps to integrate APIs. In this particular section, we would integrate our API, get a response from our API, use that response to show the data on our UI. So the next steps to integrate APIs into a Flutter application are, so basically to integrate an API, we have few steps that we can follow for our ease. Step one is get API URL and endpoint. Step two, add relevant packages into the application. Step three, create a constant file that stores URLs and endpoints. Step 4, create a model class to pass the JSON. Step 5, create a file that handles the API call and write specific methods to fetch data and parse it. Step 6, use the data in your application. Just to repeat, let me just repeat it very quickly. Step 1, you should get your API URL and endpoints. Step 2 is to add relevant packages into the application, that is HTTP or Dio or Chopper or Retrofit or anyone. Step 3 is to create a constant file that stores URLs and endpoints. Step 4 is to create a model class to parse the JSON. Step 5 is to create a file that handles the API call and write specific methods in that particular file to fetch data and parse it. And this last step, that is step 6, is to use the data in your application. So let's get started. So the first step was to get the API URL and the endpoints. So we have the API URLs ready. That is our fake store API, and the endpoint is slash product. So let me just copy it. And here we will create a folder called utils. Utils full form is utilities constants dot dart. And in this we will create const string API URL equal to our URL. That's it. Next step was to fetch or add relevant packages into the application. Now we have already added all the package that is HTTP in our application. So let's move forward. The next step was to create a constant file that stores URL and endpoints. We just recently did that. And the next step is to create a model class. We also completed that. Our model class is this one, product response model class. The next step is to create a file that handles the API call and write specific methods to fetch data and parse it. So inside the home folder, we create a folder called services, and inside that we create a file called API service.dart. Here we create class API service, and in this we create a method called get products. Now this method should actually return list of product responses. So list of product responses. And basically we would here learn three keywords, that is future, await and async. Await means that you have to wait for for the completion of execution of this particular line. Now, whenever we use await, we have to mark this function as async. That is, you have to run this function asynchronously so that it can wait for the execution of that particular line. And because you are waiting for the execution, the response or the result would be received in future. So, for example, let's suppose that you are in a line at maybe MACD, and you have ordered a burger. So, one option is to you stand in the line until your burger is ready. The other option is to you go and sit at your place. The person who is responsible would call you that your order is ready. Now, if you are standing in the line, it means that you are awaiting for your order to be prepared. And if you are going, and it means that the line is running asynchronously, and you will get your result in future. While on the other hand, if you are going to sit at your place, it means that you are not running your function asynchronously, but it is being run in the form of synchronous way. Now here we need to write final response. Basically, we would be creating a response object. We would store the response in our response object. There is a method of get, there is a method of post, there is a method of put. This all the methods are available in the HTTP package that we created. Now, it's a good practice that we use HTTP package as by using as HTTP. It means that whatever method you are going to use from the HTTP package, it should be prefixed with HTTP dot. It should be accessed to using HTTP. And the get method basically takes a URL. So here we would be using our URL that we stored. So you can see there is an error that the argument type string can't be assigned to the parameter type URI. Basically, we can't directly provide a string. It needs to be passed as a URI or a URL. Then only you can provide this URL or URI to your get method. And you can see the get method is returning future of response. Now, as we have already provided await, this response variable has become of type response. Now let's just print it response.body. All the data, the entire JSON file is available in response.body. So just to run this, let's write feature void so that we can run this particular function, and let's run it on click of a particular button. So let's convert this to a stateful widget. Basically, stateful widget has its own life cycle. Whenever the stateful widget is created, the first method which is being called is create state. It creates the state of the stateful widget. Next method is init state. Init state is the method that is called at the very first time after create state. It basically initializes that state, and all the variables that you want to initialize, you can add it in the init state. Next is did change dependencies, then did update widget, then we have set state, build method, deactivate, and dispose. Here we would be using init state, and we would call the method that we have in init state. So let me call API service dot get products. Let's see if this works or not. So what exactly we did is we created a file for our API service, and in that we used the get method of the HTTP, and we used URI.parse. Basically, we parsed the API URL. Let's see if this is working. It is working perfectly. You can see the response being printed in our debug console. Now, the next step is to convert this response. You can see this response is in the JSON format. So the next step would be to convert this JSON response into list of objects. So product list equal to, so If you remember, we created a function called product response from JSON, which was available in our model class. We need to pass response dot body over here, body of 0. Then let's print this product list and let's hot restart it. You can see there is an error, format exception, unexpected, end of unit, end of input at character 2, because we don't have to pass this 0. And you can see now it is list of responses. If I put a debug point over it, and if you hover over it, you can see we now have list of all the responses. So there are 20 items and we have list of all the product responses in our product list. Now let's return this list of product response instead of returning void. So here we would have return product list. Now from the home page, we will have to store this list of response to a particular variable or a particular object. So here we will create list of product response underscore products equal to empty list. And you can't actually await any function call in init state. The reason is if I add await over here and if I async this, you will see there would come an error that you can't await. You can see homepage state is dot init state returned a feature. State.init state must be a void method without an async keyword. Rather than awaiting an asynchronous work directly inside of init state, call a separate method to do this work. It means that you can't actually await the init state, because if you are awaiting the init state, it means that you won't be able to run your build method, you won't be able to run your did update dependencies, etc. So basically, you're not awaiting the first method itself, and hence you won't be able to render your UI. So the solution is that we create another method called maybe call API, and this will actually await the particular products, await the particular API service method. So this thing is valid. You hot restart it and it shows some error because async was there still. Okay. And you can see now now there is no error. Now let's store this list of product responses into our products. So for that, we can just do products equal to await and remove this final keyword, and let's print the products. Hot restart, and you can see we have all the list of products. Now, once the product is available, let's show it over here. So underscore products of index dot title. However, you can see that invalid value, valid value range is empty 0. Now, why this happened is we are updating the value of products, but we are not rebuilding the build method. So for this, we should call set state method. It basically calls the build method again so that the updated value of products can be accessed in the build method. Now, if you will run it, there is no error. And here, instead of item count, we would show underscore products dot length, so that the number of items been rendered is equal to the length of the products that we have. Now you can see the size of the text is too large to get fitted in the screen. So we can reduce it to maybe 15 or 10. 10 is too small. 15. You can see it still goes out of bounds. So what you can do is you wrap this with expanded widget and it throws error. You wrap this with container widget and it basically provide a width, let's suppose 500 or 50. So you can see the widget, the text goes on the next line. So what size box or container does is it constrains the size of the child widget or the child text so that it can just occupy that particular amount of size only. So let's give it as maybe 150, 200, 250, 250 is too much, 220, yeah, and increase the font size again. So you can see now the widget, the size of the text is properly available, that is 20, and it doesn't even break the UI. Let's give some padding, size box, and yeah, that's it. And so you can see that now our the title of each card is different. This is coming from an API. This is not hard coded. This is basically coming from an API. The next part should be to change the image URL as well. Now you would be wondering, where does this index came from? So if you check properly, the item builder contained two parameters, context and index. So every time the a particular item is rendered, the index value is incremented. So for this particular item, the index is 0. For the next, the index is 1. Then we have the index 2, 3, 4, like that. So you would be able to access each product with the index. Now you can see we have image and we now have separate images for each card. Same way, the next item that we had was price. So underscore product of index dot price dot toString, and let's also give the price symbol. So now we have the price listed, then we have ratings, and here basically we used the concept called string interpolation. It means that this price is particularly in double. It is not a string value. So what we did was we concatenated strings. That is, we showed price in the form of string, then added a space and showed slash dash, which was for the price. The string interpolation is used to show any particular value, any value of any data type in the form of string. The other option is to do dot toString and then plus like this dot. If we don't use string interpolation, let me just show you. Let's comment this underscore products of index dot price dot toString plus. So this is also correct, but if we have multiple strings, then this particular statement is not a good option. We should be using the concept called string interpolation, where we convert any type of string, any type of data type in the form of string. Next, we have this rating. So we have again string interpolation underscore products of index dot rating dot count, sorry, dot rate. So you can see the ratings is also now available to us, and we have the entire shopping application with custom dynamic image, dynamic ratings, dynamic text, dynamic price, etc. Now, what is the main benefit of using list without builder is if you see it properly, the images are only rendered when we are scrolling to that particular index. So if I hot restart it, so you can see these two images are rendered. When I scroll down, the images are still not rendered. It renders whenever we are going to that particular index. On the other hand, if we use list view, all the images are rendered together. This basically is not a good practice because it occupies a lot of memory. While we should always try to use list view dot builder instead of list view, so that we don't overuse the memories, and we don't we are not we don't actually do memory leaks or anything. Now this particular ratings looks a bit weird, so let's just remove the price from here and give it here. So you can see the price and this both are in column, and the entire one was in row. But now what we want to do is the text is in column, title is in column, the price and ratings is in row. So here it would be column. If we do this, you can see what happened. Then remove this particular column, wrap this text with row and add a row. And here give main axis alignment as space between. So you can see now we have the row. Remove this cross axis alignment, give cross axis alignment as start for the column. You can see now this looks much better. Now, how can we actually show the description? So what we can do is we can actually add a tap effect on this particular card, so that when a user taps on the card, it can be navigated to a details page. So let's create that particular page. So first of all, let's create a page called product underscore detail dot start. This would be a stateless widget, product detail, and we would actually take here what we will need is all the details of the project, right? So here we will take final product response, a single object of product response. And let's create a simple UI. The UI would be kind of similar to home page, where we would be having a scaffold, and in the body we would be having a card. In the card we will have a column, and in the column of children we will have first of all image dot network. In this, we will have product response dot image. Let's give it size of 200. Now let's see how does this look at list. So on tap of each card. So to capture the taps, we have two widgets, Inkwell and Gesture Detector. Gesture Detector just has Inkwell just has simple on tap, on long press, etc. On the other hand, Gesture Detector can also help you to capture drags or drag updates, etc. Here we would just use Inkwell, and we have a parameter called on tap, and here we would go with navigator dot off context dot push material page route, and let's give it the product detail, and it takes product response. So here it would be product response of this particular index, products of this particular index. So when you click on this, you can see we are getting to the product, this particular product image. Let's design our UI for this. We would be doing a kind of similar UI as homepage. So let's see what we did. We gave 50 as the padding. Let's see how does this look. This looks much better. Elevation, let's give some elevation to it. That's 20. Let's move this card to center. And below the card, we would show all the details. So let's add it to column. And then let me just copy this particular part of data. That is this column, entire column. And there is lots of errors, so let's fix them. Here it would be product response dot title instead of underscore products of index. Again, product dot price and products dot rating. Now let's see how does this look. So you can see that this looks similar to what we had on the first page. Let's do main exercise to this also, and main axis alignment to center. Now we also want to print its description, so we can have it over here itself inside the column. Let's give a text underscore product response dot description. So you can see the entire description is visible now. Let's give some styling to it. Text style, size of 15, and size box. You can also show a divider. So divider basically adds a line to between widgets. You can also give it thickness. Let's give thickness of 2 with 5. You can see the thickness. We have color. Let's give it as black. And maybe the thickness of 3. Yep. So you can see the description being available. We can also show the ratings. Actually, we can also remove this card so that it would look much better. And once we remove this card, you can see the entire description is visible. If we give app bar, and in the app bar, let's give title as product response dot title in the form of text, or maybe category or title. And you can see this is visible in all of the widgets, all of the items that we created. Now let's also create a simple button on tap of which we won't be doing much, but just a button to show how bottom navbar works. So let me just, we have a parameter of bottom navigation bar. This also takes a widget. So let's create an elevated button in the bottom navigation bar. Let's give it a child as buy now and on pressed of nothing. You can see the buy now widget is available. We can also create, instead of this, we can create our own button using container and inkwell. So child of text, buy now, height of maybe 50, color, let's give it a color, colors dot red, let's give some styling, and let's move this text to center. You can see we have actually created our own button of buy now. Now we just need to wrap this with inkwell on tap, and on top of it we can just show print bought and just write which product was bought, product response dot id. You can see when we click on buy now, bought one comma product response dot title. You can see what thing was bought. We have also added that. So you can see the how bottom navbar works. Basically, you can see there is a warning over here. Avoid print calls on production in production code. So it says that we should not use print statements when when we are using our application in production, because this print calls are accessible even in the production code. So for example, if you have your application already on Play Store, and if someone connects the application to a system, he or she will be able to see all the print statements that is being printed on the debug console. Instead of this, you can also use log. Log is only visible during the debug mode, so you can also use that, but never use the print statements. So what all things we learned in this particular section? So in this section, we started our main implementation of the API. First of all, we create a service file called API underscore service dot dart. In that, we created a class API service, and in that we created a function called get products. Now, in the get products, we for the first statement was to call the get, use the get method to call the particular API URL. Now, before that, we created the API URL constant. Inside utils folder. We created a file called constant.dart, and in that constant.dart, we stored our API URL. You can store all the constants in this folder. Now, after that, we created a service file API service. We used the get method that is available in the HTTP package. Then we inside the get method, it basically takes a URI. So to pass a to create a URI from a particular string, we have URI.parse, and it takes a URL. Then we store that response to a particular response object, and to get the list of product responses from the JSON file, we called the function called product response from JSON. It takes a string value, so we pass the response.body to it. Response.body contains all the JSON format data that we have. Now, also we should always check if the status code is 200 or not. Now, if the status code is 200, then only we should be returning this thing. Else, we should just return an empty list or something like that. Or, we should also always add try catch so that our application remains safe. And right now, we can just print if any issues are there, and then return empty list. Try catch is always necessary so that if there is any exceptions, uncaught exceptions thrown, at least you would be able to debug it by printing your exception, or doing something with your exception. So once the status code is 200, we convert a JSON format, JSON string into response object, and into list of list of products object, and then return it from our get products function. Here we learned about three keywords, that is await, async, and future. Await means that we would be waiting for the completion of the execution at this particular line, that is the eighth line, that is our API call. Async tells the function that it has to run asynchronously, and future means that we would be getting the list or the response in future or in near time. Then we move to home page. We updated our home page to a stateful widget instead of stateless widget. Then we talked or we discussed about different types of what stateful widget lifecycle is. That is, we have create state. Create state is the first function that is being called while creating the state. Then we have init state. Init state is the function that initializes the state. It is called exactly after the create state. Then we have did change dependencies. It is called when any dependencies are changed or any packages are added or removed. Then we have did update widget. It is called when the parent widget changes any configurations, and it tells the child widget that you have to update. Then we have set state. It rebuilds the build method. Then we have build method. Build method is responsible for rendering the entire UI part. Set state is responsible for rebuilding the build method or recalling the build method. Then we have deactivate. Deactivate method is called when your widget is not in the widget tree, but it is in the widget tree, but it is not visible to the user. And dispose method, it is called when you want to completely dispose or remove a particular widget from a widget tree. Then we talked that we can't await or async init state, because if we did so, it threw an error which says that you can't await init state. The reason behind this is that if you await init state, you won't be able to run your build method, and you won't be able to render your UI. So the solution is we create a separate method, maybe naming it as call API, and in that method we call the get products, or we await the API service.get products, and then we store the response to the products list of products that we created and call set state so that our build method is ran again. Then we updated a list view dot builder where we first updated the item count as the products dot length. So it will render only that much number of products, that much number of items in the list view dot builder. Then we updated all our data. That is, we updated the image URL, we updated the title, the price, ratings, etc. Then we also talked about string interpolation. It means that you can show any type of data as in the form of string using string interpolation. Then the next step, we checked what is inkwell or what is gesture detector. These are the widgets which allows you to capture the taps on a particular widget. So when you tap on this particular widget, it will navigate to product details page. So we created a product details page where we passed our current product in the constructor, and inside the product details page, we had kind of similar UI where we were showing the photo of the product, the title, price, ratings. Then we encountered a new widget called divider. Basically, it is just a line which can be used to separate two widgets. It has a parameter called thickness, which we can use to increase the thickness of the divider. Then we have the color of the divider, etc. Then we saw what bottom navigation bar is. So in the bottom navigation bar, we first added elevator button, which is already available in the Flutter framework. Then we also saw how we can create our own button, that is using inkwell and container. In the container, we give the color, height, width, we give the height. Then as the child we give center, and in the center we give the text. We change its text style to font size, color, etc. And we wrap that container with inkwell so that whenever a user clicks on it, we can do something. And then we in the inkwell, on tab of the inkwell, we just printed the value. Then we also changed the title of the app bar to the product title. So this is how we can connect our API to our Flutter application. So just to summarize, just to upgrade, or just to see what exactly we did today in this particular REST API session. The steps were that, let's just go with the steps first. Step one was to get API URL and endpoints. Step two was to add relevant packages into the application in pubspec.yaml under dependencies. A few of the packages that we have for HTTP requests are HTTP, Dio, Chopper, etc. Step 3 was to create a constant file and store the URLs and endpoints in that particular file. Step 4 was to create a model class to parse the JSON. Step 5, create a file that handles the API call and write specific methods to fetch and parse it. Step 6 was to use the data in your application, and that was it. So we covered all the steps in this particular tutorial, where we started with creating a fake API using a fake API. We created the model classes for that API. Then we created the basic UI of that particular application without the API. Then we connected the API, and we used that particular API to create a model class. Then we used the HTTP package to call the API. We got the response in the form of response object. We parsed the JSON response into the list of product response model that we created. We then used this product response. We called that particular API function in our home page in the init state. Then we used that product response on the UI to show all the details like the photo, the image, the title, the price, the ratings, the description, etc. Then we also passed one particular object of that product response to product details page where we showed the details of that particular product, the ratings, all etc. And this is how we created a full-fledged application for a product, for a shopping application. Still, there is one thing left. The login and sign up is still a static pages. So in the next section, we will see how we can connect database to login and sign up so that we can actually make the login and sign up functionality dynamic, so that we don't have to statically check whether the email ID and password is this or this, so that we can have some real data or some real users accessing the database. So in the next section we will see what Firebase is, what how we can connect Firebase Firestore to our Flutter application, how we can send data to Firebase, how we can retrieve data from Firebase, how we can check for the email ID and password in our application from the data of Firebase. And then we'll also see what all features are available in the Firebase. And then we would be completing an entire module or entire application by connecting our Firebase with our application, so that we can have dynamic users, dynamic login and sign up. Thank you.